Today's notes are keywords and phrases. It's pretty simple in that there's not any math really required. It's just understanding what is being said and by looking at an equation or an expression, or being able to write an equation or expression based on what you are told. So really this goes to word problems. So this is pretty important to understand certain words and phrases that should lead you to think, okay, this is what they're trying to make me do in this word problem, which will come up a little later. But today it's just keywords and phrases and examples. So let's just get started with addition at the very beginning. Some of the words that you might already understand for addition. So this one is probably very familiar. Some. More than. So if something is more than something else, there's more of them. Increased by. If something is increased by, say, 2, you've added to it. Total. Total usually means you're adding up a bunch of numbers together. Plus, obviously, plus is addition. That one is pretty self-explanatory. Altogether. Altogether. When you put everything all together, that means combining everything. Combining is another word that usually means addition, when you combine things together. Subtraction. Whenever you subtract two things, or they say, what is the difference between two numbers? That just means you subtract them. What is the difference? You subtract them. If something is less than something else, if Michael has $3 less than Steve, then obviously it's -3. So you subtract. Decreased by. Decreased by. If the number of eggs I have is decreased by 4, how many eggs do I have left? You're just subtracting. This one's pretty obvious. Subtracted from. And the big one, what's the opposite of plus? Minus. Subtraction is minus. Let's move down here to multiplication. So these are all words you should be looking for whenever you are reading a word problem. One of the biggest ones we use all the time, times. Something times something else. That's multiplication. Here's a really big one, product. This is a lot like sum and difference. It's usually what is the product of two numbers? Is what are these two numbers when multiplied together equal? That's what product means. Twice. If somebody went on a ride twice, they went on it 2 times. Or I made twice as much today as I did yesterday. That means I multiply it times 2. Here's some other ones that are similar. Double or triple. That means you're multiplying by 2 or 3. Let's put a little 2 or 3. You're multiplying by 2 or 3 on those. Here's a big one you see all the time, but I don't know that everybody understands it. Whenever you see of, the word of usually means multiplication. If your mom said, hey, go get me 6 of those cartons of milk, well, you're going to have to get 6 times 1 carton, right? 6 of them. Per is another one. If I have 2 candies per student in class and there's 29 kids, then it's 2 times 29, per. Division. Obviously, the biggest one, quotient. That is a big word. You'll run across it every once in a while, but very rarely. But that is the main, whenever you say, what is the answer from a division problem, what is the quotient from a division problem? This one's pretty obvious. Divided by. When one number is divided by another number. Half or third. If I take half of the students on a field trip, I'm dividing by 2. So I'm dividing by 2. Or a third, that means I'm dividing by 3. If I'm taking a third of my students on a field trip, that means I've got to divide the total by 3, and that'll give me 1/3 of the total. Separate. If I separate into equal amounts, that means I'm dividing. If I have to divide my class into 4, or if I separate my class into 4 equal amounts, or this might make even more sense, when I separate the class into equal groups for working on homework, I try to get everybody divided into 10 groups because there's 10 boards in our classroom. So when you separate, you're dividing or pulling into smaller groups. Okay, let's move on to the next part. We've got turnaround phrases. Okay, turnaround phrases kind of make you usually need to reverse the order of how things are said. So phrases like less than and subtracted from, those are words you need to keep an eye out for. That means you're going to have to rewrite that expression or equation in the opposite way. So let's say I say something like 6 subtracted from 8. You might want to write it 6 minus 8. That's not how it's written. 6 subtracted from 8. That means I had 8 and I'm taking away 6. Or it can be said the same way, 6 less than 8. It doesn't mean 6 minus 8. It means 6 less than 8. I had 8. What's 6 less than 8? Well, that, 8 minus 6. Okay, that would be how you would write that. Okay. Let me write this sentence in here. So something like 6, and let me write the actual words. 6 less than 8. That is what you would get, 8 minus 6. Okay, or you could also say 6 subtracted from 8. It's 8 minus 6. Converting words into expressions. 18 less than a number. So underline that. Where did we see that? Just right here in this turnaround thing, this turnaround phrases. So 18 less than a number. Well, what's a number? Well, it's got to be a variable. And since they're using the word n, number, I'm going to use the letter n. And less than is minus. We already know that. And this is 18. But we know we've got to flip that thing around because it's a turnaround phrase. N minus 18. Break these things down really simply. Product. Let's look at number 2. The product of a number. We know product and of usually means multiplication. So I'm going to put, I probably shouldn't put an X because that's usually our variable. But since we're going to use N for our variable, we'll just go ahead and use but let's do this. Use a little dot. Our dot means multiplication. And we know we have 6. So we have some things. I can't put multiply n 6, but it's the product of. That means I take the number and 6 and I multiply them. N times 6. Okay? I got to figure out the words and what they mean and then put them in an order that makes sense. Triple a number. So that means 3 times n. It's just a variable. And don't get hung up on variables. It's just a letter that takes the place of a number we don't know or don't know yet. It doesn't mean anything more than that. It's just a placeholder. It's almost like putting a blank, but we want to have something there that we can work with. So 3 times a number, or triple a number, that one's real easy. 3, you could write it 2 ways. 3n times n, or the way we'll probably be writing it later on is like that. Whenever you see a number and a variable right next to each other, it always means multiplication. Always means multiplication. Okay? A number increased by 9. Well, a number, n, increased by, that means plus 9. That one basically writes itself. N plus 9. So hopefully that was kind of simple. I'm going to go through. I'm going to do some of these. I'm going to tell you one of them you're probably not going to have to do. Down here on 15, we're not going to do 15 because we're not going to do square roots until, you're not going to do square roots probably till next year. The rest of these should be kind of semi-easy. I'm going to give you a couple examples, and then I want you to try the rest of them on your own. So I'm going to give you some examples on 5, 6, and 7, and then I'll show you examples on 17 and 18. But I want you to do all the rest on your own. But let's break these down. The quotient, that's a big word. We know that's division of a 20 and a number. What is quotient is divide. So it's 20 and a number, so I'm going to write them in order because there's no turnaround words or anything. So it's 20 divided by n. Or you can write it 20 over n. This is probably the preferred way. We're not going to be writing division like this too much more. Everything is going to go to that preferred way, 20 over n. Because remember, fractions are little division problems. So you should get used to writing it as 20 divided by n, 20 over n, so it looks like a fraction. 7 added to a number. So 7, that's 7, added to plus a number, n. Now technically, we're adding the 7 to a number, okay? So it's basically written like that. We're adding 7 to a number we already have. 7 added to a number. 7 plus n is not technically wrong, but this is the way it should be written. Spending $5 per day on coffee. So this one's going to take a little bit of thinking. We know there's $5. We know per is multiplication. I'm going to put a little thing there. I'm going to put a 5 here. And we need something else because the 5 has to be multiplied by something. Well, right there, per day. Well, what is a good variable letter to use for day? I like to use the first letter. That's why we've been using n for number, because number starts with n. What does day start with? D. So it's just 5 times d or 5d. And this is the preferred way to write it. Okay, because it's a simpler way to do things. 5 times d. Whenever you see, again, a number next to a letter, which is a variable, it's always multiplication. And I mean right next to a letter, nothing between them. Okay, I'm going to do 8 because it's kind of a difficult one. Saving $15 with a coupon. That one, you know what? I'm going to cross that one out. I don't like it. It's confusing. Don't worry about that one. Try to do the other ones here on your own. I want you to try to do all of them on your own except for 15. So don't come and ask me, hey, do we got to do all of them? Yeah, I'm telling you right now. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 16 you need to try to do on your own. This next part, I'll do 17 and 18. I want you to try to do the rest of them on your own. So let's look at what we have here. I've got a negative 12 plus n. Well, this would be sum. So let's make it really simple. Sum of, right? Let's just write it really easy. The sum of, right over here, the sum of negative 12 and let's call it a number, just like they've been saying, a number. Does that make sense? The sum of negative 12 and a number? Well, that's what it is. The sum of negative 12 and a number. Well, this next one, that looks pretty simple. Let's use the big words. You can write two different things. I'm going to give you two ideas here. The simplest way would be, because we know this is division, right? Negative 2 divided by n. Let's write that. Negative 2 divided by n, or we can say the quotient of -2 and a number. And technically that's probably what I should have wrote up here, was -2 divided by a number. Okay, so go ahead and try to do the rest of those on your own. If you can, try to come up with as many as 2. But after that, you will be working on your homework.